There's a moment when you open a wartime diary and, well, the world around you just drops away. You're suddenly face to face with someone who had no guarantee of survival, no certainty of tomorrow, and no idea that their private words would someday guide future generations. Yet the remarkable thing is how often these entries are steady, methodical, and unbroken by despair. They reveal something modern audiences rarely see: the ability of ordinary men and women to preserve order in a world built on chaos. Before we dive into these 7 lessons, take the next minute to center yourself the same way these diarists centered themselves each night. This isn't nostalgia. It's an excavation of real strategies forged under the hardest conditions humans have ever endured. And if you're here on Battlefield Survival, then you already understand why learning from these voices matters. These diaries aren't relics, they're manuals. They show how hope is sustained not by wishful thinking, but by discipline, structure, and small daily choices that keep a person from collapsing when everything else is falling apart. Lesson 1 is that maintaining a strict daily routine was not optional. It was psychological armor. You know, many soldiers and civilians wrote in their diaries about forcing themselves to keep the same order of tasks, regardless of the day's events. Whether it was a British Home Guard volunteer recording his morning watch duties, or a Polish resistance courier noting the same 3 tasks she completed at sunset, routine served as a replacement for stability. The structure gave the mind something to hold on to when the wider world had none. For today's survival-minded viewer, the application is clear. Build a daily routine that stays steady even when circumstances don't. The routine might be morning maintenance checks on gear, a fixed training window, or, a consistent journaling practice at the end of the day. What matters is that it becomes a non-negotiable anchor, exactly as it was for people living through bombings, blackouts, and occupation. Lesson 2 is that diarists learn to separate emotion from decision-making without suppressing their humanity. World War II diaries are filled with fear, grief, and anger, but these emotions rarely dictated practical choices. A Soviet nurse might record her heartbreak over the day's casualties, then immediately shift to describing the exact steps needed to reorganize supplies. A Japanese naval mechanic might vent about exhaustion before outlining what repairs must be prioritized. They did not pretend the emotions didn't exist. They simply refused to let those emotions guide tactical judgment. Anyone studying survival today can mirror this approach. Acknowledge stress, but make decisions based on facts, not spikes in emotion. Sometimes this could mean, writing down your options before actually acting, or maybe establishing a preset protocol for emergencies that just can't be overridden by fear. Lesson 3 is that hope was never really passive. It was, in fact, constructed through information and perspective. Multiple diaries, well, they show people seeking updates whenever possible, even if the news was, let's say, rather grim. Knowing what was happening provided context and honestly prevented catastrophic thinking. A London civilian under the Blitz might note the locations of bomb damage, not to feed anxiety, but to understand patterns. A United States infantryman in Europe might, write down rumours and official reports in separate lines so he could track what sources were reliable. Hope came from clarity, not ignorance. Translating this into modern terms means, creating your own information discipline. Verify before believing, track sources and keep a written log so your mind maintains perspective instead of drifting into speculation. Lesson 4 is that personal standards mattered more when the world had none. In diaries from prisoner of war camps, ghettos and frontline outposts, people consistently mention small acts of order. Shaving even without hot water, cleaning boots, maintaining posture, or reviewing notes from training. These small acts weren't vanity. They were a declaration that circumstances wouldn't define identity. Even survivors of the Warsaw Ghetto recorded simple routines, like folding clothes the same way each night. For the modern survivalist, this means enforcing your own standards even when conditions deteriorate. Maintain gear, maintain hygiene, maintain the level of discipline you would expect in normal times. It reinforces mental resilience in ways you only understand once you stop doing it. Lesson 5 is that diarists practice controlled focus to prevent mental fragmentation. You'll often find narrow entries that focus on one detail of the day rather than the full horror surrounding the writer. A Norwegian resistance member might devote an entire page to describing the weather or the state of a trail. This wasn't distraction, it was mental triage. Focusing on a single manageable detail preserved clarity. Today you can apply this by narrowing your attention during stress to the smallest actionable task. One knot to tie, one fire to manage, one map adjustment to complete. When the mind is overwhelmed, precision on a single point restores control. Lesson 6 is that community discipline created shared hope, stronger than individual optimism. Group diaries kept in shelters, resistance cells or field units show that people drew strength from working inside a disciplined group. The presence of others who upheld standards, kept watch, rotated duties and maintained morale multiplied resilience. Modern viewers can take this as a reminder to build reliable networks. Shared routines, shared training, and shared responsibilities are force multipliers. Hope, in this sense, becomes structural rather than emotional. Lesson 7 is that, recording your own story reinforces mental endurance. Almost every World War II diarist, soldier, civilian, prisoner, medic or messenger used writing as a tool to organize thoughts, discharge fear, and, re-establish control. They weren't writing for history. They were writing for survival. Keeping your own log or journal today works the same way. It clarifies your decisions, tracks patterns, and reduces the mental load. Even in non-crisis settings, this habit increases resilience by sharpening memory and situational awareness. These 7 hope and discipline lessons from World War II diaries remain some of the most practical psychological tools you can adopt. If you want more deep dive material like this, subscribe to Battlefield Survival, share this with another history enthusiast, and keep strengthening your knowledge base, one lesson at a time.